So, have you ever wondered what exactly is going on inside an IELTS examiner's head during the speaking test? Well, it's not some big secret. It's actually a super structured method. And today, we're going to pull back that curtain and show you exactly how they do it.
Welcome to the IELTS Focus. Look, what we're doing here is breaking down the official three-step assessment method that every single examiner is trained to use. And trust me, getting your head around this process, it can be an absolute game changer for how you prepare. Okay, first things first, your score isn't just some random gut feeling the examiner has. No way. It's actually a methodical three-part journey they go on, mapping out your performance right from the start all the way to the end. And here is that journey, broken down into three simple steps. First, we have the first impression in part 1. Then, it's all about focusing on features in part 2. And finally, they decide on the final band in part 3. So let's dive into what each of these really means, shall we?
All right, let's kick things off with step 1, the first impression. This whole thing happens right at the beginning, in part 1 of the test. This is where the examiner starts to build, an initial picture of what you can do. But, and this is super important, it is not the final decision, not even close.
And check this out, this quote is pulled directly from the official examiner training stuff. It tells them to make an initial rating. So what does that mean? It means right from the get-go, the examiner is thinking, does this feel like a band 6 or maybe a 7? They're basically setting up a temporary range, a starting point.
So while you're talking about familiar stuff like your home or your studies, the examiner is already forming a hypothesis about your level. A good way to think about it is like a rough draft of your score. And they totally get that you might be nervous, so nothing is set in stone. It's just a working theory, a place to start from.
Okay, on to step 2, focusing on features. Now, this is arguably the most critical part of the whole assessment. Why? Because this is where the examiner stops just getting a feel for things and starts actively hunting for cold, hard evidence to back up that initial hypothesis. Yeah, you can really think of the part 2 long turn as an evidence hunt. I mean, for 2 whole minutes, it's all you. The floor is yours. And the examiner's job? It flips from just forming an impression to actively searching for concrete proof of what you can do with the language. And this evidence they're looking for, it really falls into 2 main buckets. You've got your band lifting features. These are the good things, the strengths that can literally push your score higher. And then you've got your band limiting features. These are the weaknesses that kind of put a ceiling on how high your score can go. So what are these band lifting features? Well, they're those aha moments that make an examiner sit up and think, wow, that was a great word, or ooh, nice complex sentence. It's when you pull out some less common vocabulary and use it correctly, or show off your grammar skills, or just speak with a really nice, natural flow. This is the stuff that proves you deserve a higher band. Now, on the flip side, you have the band limiting features. And just like the name says, these are the things that hold you back. We're talking about things like making the same grammar mistakes over and over, repeating really simple words, or if your pronunciation is just a bit unclear and makes it hard to follow you. These are the roadblocks, the things that can stop you cold from getting to that next band level. So, at this point, the examiner has a first impression and they've gathered a bunch of evidence. So what's next? Well, we've arrived at step 3, the final decision. This is the home stretch. This is where everything gets confirmed in part 3, and your final score gets locked in for good. And in part 3, there is one single crucial question running through the examiner's mind. Is this performance consistent? I mean, after you spoke for 2 minutes straight in part 2, can you actually keep that level up when we start talking about more complex, more abstract topics? Yep, that's the key word right there, consistency. It all boils down to that. If you want a high band score, you've got to show them you can perform at that level. Not just for a minute, but throughout the entire test. A few fancy sentences here and there, that's not going to cut it. The examiner needs to be convinced that this is your real, stable, reliable level of English. And that's exactly why the questions in part 3 get more abstract. They're designed specifically to push you and test this. The examiner's listening, and they're checking. Can you keep that fluency going? Are you consistently showing off the good stuff, the features of that band you're aiming for? This is the moment they either confirm their initial idea about your score or adjust it before making that final call. So let's just quickly recap the whole process, right? Part 1, that's for the first impression. Part 2, that's the big evidence hunt for all the lifting and the limiting features. And finally, part 3, that's where they confirm the final score, and it's all about your consistency. Simple as that. So, why does any of this matter? Why are we going through all this? Because knowing exactly how you're being scored, well, that's the secret to preparing strategically. It completely changes how you should be thinking about and approaching this test. So let's nail down the key takeaways here. First, remember, scoring is a structured, logical process, not just a feeling. Your big goal is to be consistent from the first hello to the final goodbye. Part 2 is your moment to shine, to give them all that positive, band-lifting evidence. But, and this is the kicker, you've got to keep it up through the tough questions in Part 3 to really lock in that high score. So there you have it. You now know the examiner's method, from that initial impression all the way to the final evidence-based decision. So the big question I have for you is this. Now that you know how it works, how are you going to change your strategy to make sure you're giving that examiner exactly the evidence they're looking for?